Today, I have a guest, Dave G. from Scotland, we're going to say. How are you, Dave?
That's it, John. Yeah, I'm good. I'm good. Like, yeah, I was out for a run earlier on, so I'm kind of just recovering from that. Like, yeah, yeah,
Very good.
yeah.
I'm going to get through this episode without a translator somehow.
I
Oh my
want,
goodness, you've got an accent.
yeah,
We'll
it's not
make
as
it. We'll
strong
be
as
just
other
fine.
people's. Like,
We'll
yeah,
be
yeah.
fine. So anyway, language problems aside, and we are speaking the same language, believe it or not. Anyway, Dave, I thought what we would do here is just if you could share your story, and I might just heckle you along the way and ask you questions, or maybe interject something that I've a similar experience that I've had. What I do know about you is that you've been listening to the podcast for a couple of years. That
I have,
you
yeah, yeah. You and Angela and various other speakers, and took a lot from it. Yeah,
Cool. And you have just recently started going to secular meetings, and you find the language there is suiting you better than what you've had experienced before.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Correctly,
Okay.
yeah.
And you coming
Yeah,
up in February, you will be sober 28 years.
that's correct. Yeah, it's just a fact. I use it just as a number, but
Okay.
yeah, I'll pat myself on the back for it. But yeah, it's just a number.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that is all I know about you. So why don't you begin and share your story with us?
Okay, right. Well, as you said there, I've been abstinent of the alcohol for coming up for 28 years, and yeah, I began drinking, probably like a lot of people did, in church discos and community centres, and I can look back now in retrospect, and I can see the reasons why I did drink the way that I did. And it was really a lack of self worth towards myself, really low self esteem. But I didn't, label it that at the time. I didn't think that. And I've got two brothers as well that always put this in when I'm asked to share. They've never attended Alcoholics Anonymous, as far as I know. So I really believe it was something within my disposition, my personality that led me to going down the route of abusing alcohol. So I picked up a drink firstly at the age of, I think it was 15, and and then I gravitated towards, shortly after, in the early 1980s, to a kind of group called, they were Football Hooligans, really. Football Hooligans. And that was a drug in itself, football violence. Albeit I didn't get involved in the kind of thuggery that went on. I was the person who would put myself into situations that were really self-defeating, to say the least. Insane. And I say this plenty of times, that it was because I didn't, somebody who was healthy would not have done the things that I did. Somebody who felt good about themselves, who felt high self-esteem, self-worth, would not have done. And I like the phrase, when the drink's in, the wit's out. So there was no real connection from to make those decisions, when you're sober, at all. So hospitalised on a few occasions. Yeah, and that really was a catalogue of disastrous things. I use a bit of hyperbole there, but it really was, John. It was a case of a lot of self-pity, and I was gathering a lot of unaddressed mental health issues. There was a suicide attempt at the age of 17, and somebody who was healthy, they would have talked to somebody about that. I didn't, so that's how it went. And
But there's a lot of stigma though tied around mental illness. And I remember when I was that age, dealing with just mental illness in my family, it was something that we never talked about.
yeah, absolutely. I don't want to really veer too much into my own family, but I've spoken to my cousin since then, and there was a use of alcohol that really that didn't bother on the particularly healthy. And yeah, there was nothing along that lines discussed, and I really wish that one of my parents saw me and said, "Look, you're not very well. We'll help you." But there was nothing of that case at all. So I must admit, I felt yeah, I felt kind of abandoned by them. But that was my two brothers never felt that. So I think there was something within me. I say that reluctantly, but there was something within me that was,
Sure. Well, I'm sorry for interrupting you, but go ahead.
no, that's fine, it's fine. Um, so yeah, I've held in meetings. People went across the glamorous locations and they did that and they did that. For myself, there was nothing of that ilk. What did I do in my life when I was drinking and taking other chemicals as well, drugs, particularly amphetamines, which was not good for my mental health at all. I really didn't do anything at all. I suppose I portrayed an image to people, and I got this. I think I nurtured it, John. I think it was the toughest guy. The toughest guy in the school. It was really just one notorious fight. And then later on, when I got involved in the football, I did some stupid things, and it was like a kind of badge of recognition. I did these things, so I knew that people. How perverse is that? But I kind of knew people would talk about me, in a perverse kind of way, but really self-defeating. And yeah, not really talking or opening up to anybody at all. So I've really felt disconnected, isolated, and really. So I became like a mute. I see that today. I really became like a mute where I really didn't open up to anyone at all. So when I was in the bar, it would be like just Mr. Cool and enigmatic, and inside, I really felt lost, you know. And that continued for a long time. And as I say, getting hospitalised a few times. I remember one time I got mugged outside a bar, and the nurse I came to, and I remember saying something about hematoma, which is apparently something that's apparently a bleed on the brain or the head or something that, so that was the extent that my drinking was taking me to. And yeah, I was.
Was that caused directly by the drinking, or was there an accident, or?
That was caused, for me, I look back on it now, cause and effect. If I hadn't been drinking, that wouldn't have happened. Yeah, so I wasn't sober. I was in a bar, and I was staring out this person in the bar, thinking that I was, Mr. Tough Guy. And then I left the bar on my own, and then they must have taken some kind of reprisals, which I didn't do anything to them, but they must have thought, we'll sort him out. And then I came in the hospital, and so yeah, the consequences of polluting my brain and my, with alcohol, really, but it became such a habit where, I look at it like vibration, all this stuff, and that stuff I was really just, if there's low energy, that's what I just became so used to. And it wasn't very nice at all, and yeah, just similar consequences, similar events, and never letting anybody in at all into my life.
And at what point were you starting to think you had a problem? Did you kind of in the back of your mind think that you were having a problem, or were you completely unaware? It's kind of it's an odd thing to think back on. I mean, when I look back at my drinking, I think that I was in such denial, that in retrospect, I can look back on my drinking and I can say that I knew I had a problem, but I couldn't admit it. But I didn't know that at the time. At the time, all I knew is that I was just trying to find different ways to make it work. I wonder do you recall what your mindset was?
I just felt so lost for so long. I felt so lost, and I felt, I just could not see a way out of it. It was like a repetition of feeling miserable continually, John, to the point where there was just a sense of, well, okay, groundhogged every day, get out of this. It really was. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Keep doing the same thing, you get the same result. But I just don't know. I didn't really have the, how could I say, there was no awareness that there could be something different. So, yeah, well, I mean, pee in the bed should have been a reason.
I
Being
know.
event.
We can always look back and think, well, it was obvious that there was a problem, but it wasn't. So I understand.
That
Yeah.
should have been one big red flag.
Yeah.
You're doing this regularly. But, well, I just got used to that. I've said it, to people, in my life since then. But, that should have been the reason to stop, but it wasn't, and that just became the norm, you know.
So at what point did you get help, and how did that manifest? Where did you go?
Yeah, good question. I like to hear that because whenever I'm speaking to somebody, I go to the school talks these days. I don't know what they call it over in America. Is it H&I? I think we've got PI here, public information.
Oh
You can
yeah, I
go
think
to
they
schools
call it
and do
that here.
talks.
They used to in
Yeah,
public information for AA.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. You do that?
Um, yeah. I enjoy that. Yeah, I've done about 4 or 5 over the last couple of months. But yeah, I like to give people hope as well. Anyone I'm talking to. Yeah, I was just actually on a 12-step call actually about half an hour ago. How did I get help? I think it was myself. I realised I had a gambling problem as well. I worked offshore on oil rigs, and I was literally, I was peeing it against the wall, so to speak. It's a phrase we use, just not using it, using the money effectively. So I went to Gamblers Anonymous, and somebody there saw that, I had a drink problem, because when I was asked to share, my brain was just so. I used the cooking analogy. It was boiled, fried, scrambled, pickled, mashed, just all those things there. Probably due to the physical beatings and the constant, angst and torment that goes along with drinking. So I was going on there, and then he said, "Why don't you go along to a meeting?" Which I did. I saw him there, and he introduced me to other people. Now, whether he had decided to do something there in a subtle way to introduce me to AA, but I just felt that, and I try to avoid the cliches, but I did feel that warmth that I never felt before. And I felt people were willing to listen to Dave. People were just willing to give me their time. I never really felt that before in my life. And again, I realized I had to do something different. I had to do something different, and that felt different. Felt different. Um, so shortly after, well, I'd continued drinking, and then I realised I need to get my act sorted out. And I went to meetings, and then somebody who was in a treatment centre offered me a place in the treatment centre, which was about, I think it's about 10 or 12 miles outside the city where I stay. And then I was in there for just under 5 months.
Oh wow,
Yeah.
wow. Was it helpful?
It was helpful. It was, yeah. It gave me the opportunity to mix with people where I'd never ever done that before. I think I've maybe mentioned that, or I've alluded to that, previously when we've been speaking, but I just, I was there around people, but I just never felt, a part of things. I was all, you could be so kind of cliche, but if you're in amongst the crowd, you can still feel lonely. That was definitely myself. Whereas in that confine, I never cooked a meal for anybody.
Really?
Yeah, all these stuff, social skills zero, interpersonal skills zero, and doing these little things that people just take for granted. Never done them. So, yeah, but I was quite glad to get out, to be honest. It was like a prison sentence in the end. I'm not being too derogatory towards the whole thing, but it was good to get out into society, and then that's where things just changed.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and I want to get back to the public information work that you do before we sign off. But what about? So, what was your first impression of AA after you started going to meetings? Did you identify as a secular person or as a religious person? And did any of the God language bother you? How did you deal with all that?
Initially, when I came around, no, not at all. When I first came to meetings, it was more. When the God language was constantly churned out, and I had no real aversion to it at the time, and even to this day, the word higher power, it doesn't really make that prickly at all. I can kind of see a rationale, to that there. If, for example, if we want help, with any particular part of our lives, I need to connect with that, source, that resource, you know. Yeah, exactly. I use that word, a lot. But at the time, no, not at all. But objectively, or subjectively, I don't know objectively what people would say over the years, but I've never peppered my shells with, and I've got a God in my life and blah, blah, blah.
Do you hear a lot of that over there in Scotland in the meetings? Because you would hear.
Yeah, and I've heard, and I find it bizarre that the Lord's Prayer is read out in some meetings. That honestly, John, I find that quite bizarre.
Now, do
But
they do
anyway,
that? Do they do that over? Do they do that in Scotland?
No, certainly over in the west coast and around about the Glasgow area, there's certainly a more higher predominant towards a more sectarian, kind of Roman Catholic, Protestant slight divide. But I've not really heard that happens. So it just ends with the Serenity Prayer.
There you go. Yeah, that's when I was in meetings in New York. I think that most of the meetings in New York City are like that. But most of the meetings around here in the Midwest where I live end with the Lord's Prayer. At least they the last time I've been going, and yes, that's the way it is. Except for our secular meetings, which are nice.
Yeah. And how did you feel about that?
Oh gosh. Well, when I first started, first of all, I was surprised that there had anything to do with God in AA. I didn't know anything about AA other than what I saw in the movies, and there was never anything in the movies about people holding hands and praying, So I had a dear aunt who I loved, who I knew was in AA, and she wasn't particularly religious or anything. So I never imagined that it had anything to do with it. So I was very surprised to see God all over the place. But the first group that I went to, they were pretty good about telling me not to worry about it. And I didn't identify as an atheist, Dave. I didn't know what I was. I didn't have any religious background at all. But I wasn't comfortable with religion because I didn't have any familiarity with it, and I felt like an outsider. I felt like I couldn't connect to somebody because I didn't know anything about religion. I didn't have that experience. So it was an obstacle for me in that respect. It made me feel like, okay, once again, someplace where I can't fit in because I don't know anything about this. But the people at the meeting were very, very nice to me about all that and really told me not to worry about it too much. But then I went to another group where it was a men's group, and that became my home group. And they were more fundamental about the big book. And all of a sudden, the higher power thing and God was becoming, and praying and all that stuff was being pushed on me a lot harder. But I was young, and what I did is I just kind of conformed to whatever these people, mostly older guys, were telling me to do. So that's what I did. And then it took me a long time, like 25 years before I realized this is bullshit. I got to be myself.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's taken me a long time to realize that, I suppose, in life, and recovery or whatever, and I suppose the word recovery is used because, I'm not drinking or drugging. And my life does involve some, hopefully, healing and becoming, hopefully, a better person. For myself, it involves not just conforming. I've been saying this quite recently, more and more openly. I don't need to conform. And that's actually the worst thing that it can do for my soul is to conform.
It is, absolutely. And I've learned that too, that if you're communicating with, working with, helping somebody who is just getting into recovery, they need to find their own way to experience and express it. And the best thing that we can do is help somebody achieve whatever goals they have in being a sober person, and not dictate that they have to, follow a particular path,
Yeah. What I found, disturbing, could I say that there? Yeah, at times, it disturbs me sometimes, is that when people say you need to believe in a God or you need to believe in a higher power, it's fine, whatever anybody wants to believe, but please explain why and tell me the rationale and tell me it's like, this higher power, when people roll that out, explain what that is to you then. Don't just please just give it, as a statement that somebody has to conform to without any substance behind it about what it is.
You mentioned something when you first contacted me that when you start going to the couple things, you mentioned this word language a couple of times, that when you listen to the podcast that I did with Tara, that you mentioned that you liked the language that we were using, and that your experience with these secular meetings, you also like the language. And I think that's really important because there is a certain language, a lingo in recovery, and in particular in Alcoholics Anonymous. And like that word higher power, for example, that's a word that I didn't grow up using. It's not natural in my vocabulary to use the word higher power. So my language now is that, okay, those aren't my words. That's not how I describe things. And I just speak in normal, regular language, which for me would mean that other people helped me. Other people helped me. Are they a higher power? I don't know. They're not a higher power. If you want to call it that, fine. But they're just people who help me. And that's language, and that's the language. But for so long I was in that I was in that culture where I had to speak their language, and the higher power is one of those terms.
Yeah, and I like what you said there. I had to speak that language, and I don't know when it happened for myself, but I realized this isn't good for my soul here. When I'm feeling either slightly, I'm going to be shamed or guilt tripped, or I'm going to have the rolling eyes because I'm not conforming. I think I'm one of the few in my favour who say openly in meetings where I'm from, I don't revere the two founders of AA simply because it takes away from the story that I have. It takes away, it's like place, and it taps into my codependency as well. It places them on a pedestal that their story is more better than mine's. It's not.
No. You know what? I've come to realize that, and not just with AA, but just like history in general, sometimes it's better not to focus on the people, but just focus on whatever ideas they had, or whatever movement came out of whatever they did. Because people, if you just think, if you put people on a pedestal, they're always gonna fail. No, they're all human beings have their weaknesses and their bad points, and also it becomes kind of like a cult when you focus on a person rather than the ideas. So like with AA, for example, if all we did was focus on the founders, it's like that, we have to somehow replicate what they did. But if we instead just kind of focus on the ideals of the of what AA has become, and what our recovery is, I think it's a little bit better. But I'm just kind of formulating those thoughts here recently, how I feel about that.
No, yeah, I agree. And I try to, anybody that asks for me to help them, I try to put forward the principles, and also I've got to be mindful of myself on a personal level. I'm not there to be Mr. Shining, Knight in Shining Armor, Mr. Virtuous, and that can be detrimental to me as well. I'm probably better to just try and practice some things that I never did before. And I like that from probably step 7 in the A's, language of, being aware of where we were, the not so good habits, and then just simply try to practice something different. Because otherwise, I'm going to focus on the language with the defects or whatever. Or, it's like, I think I read somewhere, I've actually accumulated a fair library of secular literature, which I really like.
Oh, yeah, you mentioned that.
Yeah. I'd be interested to hear what your favorites are, like, to be honest.
Oh my gosh. Okay, I don't. It's hard to pick a favorite, but I will tell you that one of the first books that I read was Mario Hornbacher's "Waiting," a non-believer's higher power, I believe is what it's called, "Waiting," and that book might not be my cup of tea now, But at the time when I was kind of starting on this journey, it was really important to me because I thought that I still needed some sort of a spiritual language. And that book, she helps someone who's agnostic find their own spirituality or their own way to connect. It's a beautiful book, and I still love it. But that was one of the first books that I read. Then another book that I really liked is actually written by a guy by the name of Bill W. And I think it's called The Secular 12 Steps. Yeah, The Secular 12 Steps.
God,
yeah. And that's a good book. It's a small book, but what I like about that is Bill is he teaches, I think, biology. So he's a scientist. He teaches biology in a college. So he's got this scientific brain, and he's talking about, in the first part of the book, he's talking about addiction from a scientific perspective. And then he goes into the steps, and he breaks them down in components like as you would go through your recovery. So when you're starting off in the beginning, and then you go and you, as you get better and you advance. And anyway, it's really a well done book. It's been a while since I've read it. That's a really good book. And then just for meeting topics, I would use Joe's book, Beyond Belief, Agnostic Musings for 12-Step Life. A book that I recommend for women is The Alternative 12 Steps. A guy, I like
that one actually.
Yeah. But I like it too. But in particular, most of the women that I know in my group really like that book. It's very relatable. It's written by two women, and so it's a really good book. So yeah, there's a lot of them out there. What are your favorites?
Yeah, it's just like that one by The Alternative 12 Steps by Martha.
And Martha Cleveland. And RLSG, I think.
Another woman. Yeah. And I like the way she describes, she mentions the Latin word for spirit is just vigor. And there's another couple of words. So just energy, and, I like that. I've recently got Serge Pringle. I think did you have him on?
Oh yeah, boy, those are good. Serge Pringle. Yeah, is it the Practical 12 Steps? Yep. He is so cool. Because he looks at those steps. He's a life coach and a therapist, and he uses those steps not for alcoholics, but just for people who want to affect change in their life. And he fell in love with the steps because he thought they were a great way to affect change. And then he's rewritten them over the years. He's kind of improved upon them over the years. So yeah, that's a pretty interesting book too.
And I like Roger C's the little book. Yeah, because I just like the 4 people. I don't think they're affiliated with 12-step programs, which is okay. Yeah, it's fine. But they're certainly renowned in a particular field. One's, I know there's a famous particular person who's got a film out, Gabor Mate, and I think another three others. But I like their different take on the steps. I like that as well.
I'll tell you one of my favorite books that's not necessarily one of the secular literature, but it's The Unexpected Joy of Being Sober. And I would check that out if I were you. And it's Catherine Graham, I think. And anyway, it's a really good book. And it's secular because she never talks about God, but it's not intentionally secular. It's a very modern take on recovery.
Yeah. I just like the practicalities of, for myself being sober, I never connected. And for myself, I just like the practicalities of just being a human and finding out ways where I can, obviously, being aware of where my ego's coming to play, where does fear come into play, and then what's stopping me from connecting with people, and helping them or helping myself as well. Really, rather than, I don't know if I ever expected this particular God or deity, but when I hear people say that, I'm thinking, is that them abdicating responsibility for really, making the effort to connect with people?
Yeah. Well, tell me about the secular meetings you go to. When did you start going, and are they online, or what's the story behind that?
Like a lot of people over the last year and a half, I started to go on Zoom. And how did I was actually thinking before we did the podcast this evening, how did I start going to secular? I really can't remember what it happened. It could have been where I was on a meeting, but I certainly was exploring stuff before before
So you kind of knew they
COVID kicked
existed.
in. Yeah, I did. Yeah, I did.
Well,
Yeah,
yeah, and you were listening to this podcast too for a couple of years.
yeah, exactly. That's right. I was listening to yourself as well. Yeah, and it's just been a kind of um, evolution since then, if that's the right word. And I go to maybe probably sometimes a couple a day because they're so convenient to go to. Particularly one called Toastmasters. I wish I knew what the Irish translation was.
Yeah,
But
that's the Irish one, isn't it?
yeah, really friendly group, and yeah, they've got them on every day. Yeah, so it's been really helpful for me to just again for the language point of view be able to just be more frank and honest rather than feeling I've got to a particular line and say a particular thing when really um, the secular stuff yeah, it just comes from a more free expression.
Tell me this, Dave. How have you been doing with the how the world has changed because of this pandemic, and especially how we experience our recovery? How are you doing with all of this? Have you noticed a change within yourself about how you think about, meetings and recovery and the importance of connection with people? What do you think is going on? Or have you even reconciled whatever change or whatever thoughts you have about this?
When COVID was at, I suppose it's kind of lockdown periods last year.
Yeah, you had
And
some
I was
severe
actually,
lockdowns, much more than we have in the U.S. Mm-hmm.
yeah, and I was actually off work for a period of time as well because of COVID. I decided to get a structure to my day because I just knew if not, as we know, it's we can just kind of be lazy, and before we know it, I'm kicking it to not so good habits. So for myself, when that happened last year, I would make a purposeful point of trying to learn my keyboard. I would make a purposeful point of doing exercise. I would make a
Good for
purposeful
you. Good
point
for you. I
of
just now started doing that. Like a year and a half, I wasn't getting any exercise, and now for like this is like week 2, but I feel great.
To be honest, John, yeah, exercise is my I love my dopamine fix. I just love it, and it really is. It's just it ticks the box of medicine.
It makes a huge difference. And what kills me is I like to run, and I've been running for God since I guess I was in my 30s. So over 20 years I've been running, but I haven't always been real consistent about it. But what kills me is when I'm really consistent about it and do it on a regular basis, I love it. I love it when I'm doing it. I love it after I'm done with it. I like the experience of how it kind of clears my mind. Everything, I like the way it makes me, I like everything about it. But then something happens and I stop. And I forget about how much I like it. Because when you go back, it's kind of hard again because it's like, oh crap, I can't do this like I used to do, So like right now, I'm just kind of accepting because I'm kind of getting back. I hadn't run for a couple of years. So I'm just kind of getting back to thinking like, okay, I'm just going to accept where I'm at now. I'm happy with where I'm at now. And that's kind of a nice little lesson for life too, isn't it?
Yeah. Absolutely, yeah. I'd say the same as well. But also, whether it's good for me or not, I don't know. I always think, well, okay, what can I try and do? What can I try and do different or improve? I've been doing outdoor swimming as well. I'm going in the sea. Yeah,
In the cold
but
like
it really
that?
is. Yeah. I've been going in skins without the
I could
wetsuit.
never do that.
Yet. That no.
Wait, you jump in there without a wetsuit?
Yes.
Oh my
yes.
God.
But yeah, but you must have heard of Wim Hof and all that. But to be honest, there's lots of things that I'd recommend to people. Even early recovery. Meditation, for example.
Uh-huh.
I don't think people need to wait till they get to step 11.
No, they don't. It's simple. And that's another thing. Meditation is very, very good for me too. And it's just like exercise. When I'm doing if I'm meditating regularly, I enjoy all the benefits. I think it's great. But if I stop, I kind of forget all of that, and it's really hard to get back. It's just a matter of, I think for me, having a good habit it's hard to start, but once I start it, I can keep it going. But those good habits are just keep them going, whatever it is. I don't know. I just have never had that consistency with any of that but I can, I might go for a couple of years and be pretty consistent, but then I might go a year without being consistent. So it's kind of that way. Anyway, I'm kind of digressing on other subjects, but I'm very interested in about the public information work that you do. And is that through the service structure in AA that you're doing it?
Yeah, I'm aware there's opportunities to speak at schools, so and I'm aware of the person who does that, and I really enjoy it. The last one I did, I stood up there and I says, I never thought I'd be in a position where I was speaking to you guys, because we don't do it. I didn't think at the age of 14 that I would have led the lifestyle that I did. And been able to speak. I didn't ever think I'd be speaking in a podcast here just now, but I am. It's fine.
I know.
It's fine.
I never dreamed of this either.
No, I was gonna. Sorry, I'll jump back to the PI because I am willing to talk about that. I was interested. You're the interviewer, and I'm the interview. But I mean, is there a couple of things or anything since you've been sober that you never thought you'd been able to do?
Oh well. First of all, I'm very introverted. I'm very shy. I'm very, if I'm around people, it's really difficult for me to like do small talk and stuff. Right. But for some reason I can sit here and do a podcast and have 10,000 people download it and listen to a conversation and just enjoy it, So I don't know. It's hard for me to understand why I can be one way around people and then I can be so I enjoy these conversations. But yeah, this is something I never thought I could ever do, and this happened by accident. What happened was back in 2015 I was on a podcast and it was a lot of fun. I was a guest and it was a lot of fun. And then I was going to start this website that Roger C. wanted me to start, and it was called AA Beyond Belief. And I liked the podcast so much, I thought I would like to do a podcast myself. And I knew nothing about podcasting. But I thought, this website was going to have people who would write articles and submit articles and stuff. And I thought we could have those people as for guests. But what I ended up doing is having people from all kinds of secular AA groups come on as guests and share their stories, like what we're doing now. And I just fell in love with it. So, but this is something I never expected. And now it's like the biggest part of my recovery. I don't really go to very many meetings anymore. This is my meeting today, talking to you,
Yeah.
So,
yeah. And it really has enhanced my, I suppose it's a recovery. I try to avoid the kind of glib statements, but yeah, it has enhanced my life, listening to you and Angela and over the period of a year and a half or whatever, and the other guests you had on. I liked the one you had recently with We Are Not All Egomaniacs. I've tried to get the book in the UK, but but I can't find it.
Yeah, she's good.
Yeah.
But anyway, back to your PI.
Yeah.
So how old are these kids that you're talking to?
The ones that I spoke to on, what's the day? Was it Thursday? They were actually, which is unusual, they were 18.
Okay.
So we would class that as probably sixth year. But previously, they've been 13, 14, quite young. I suppose you wonder, how much information are they willing to take in? But I suppose, you can only do your best, and you never know what seed might have been planted. I do remember when I was younger, probably maybe even actually earlier age than them. I remember Paul Kossoff, his dad came in from Free. He was a drummer in the band Free.
Oh, okay.
And his dad came in and did a similar talk, but obviously it didn't have maybe much of an impression on me, but.
I don't think we ever had a talk like that when I was in high school. It could have made a difference. I was already becoming a problem drinker when I was in high school, but by the time I was 19, I had a full blown problem then. But do you get any kind of reaction from the kids after you talk?
Yeah, they appreciate it. Some are, it's a bit like pulling teeth, some of them, getting questions from them. And that's the part that I really enjoy when we go along. And we've made more of an emphasis to the facilitator who organises it and discussion with ourselves. She realises it's a good thing to let the teachers know, hey guys, the kids, you're going to be asked some questions here. If you can think of some questions, that's the part that I like, where they're
And
interacting with
the thing about
ourselves.
it that is good, even if there's a kid there that is having already starting drinking and maybe even having problems, but is not really recognizing it and won't even entertain the idea. 10 years down the road, he might remember your talk. 5 years down the road, 2 years down the road, he might remember your talk. And so, you are kind of lighting that spark.
Yeah. And just what you're saying there, for myself, that's why I stay sober today is, and not that I needed it, the myth smash, but, life has its ups and downs. My mood has its ups and downs sometimes, and there's stressors and the things that happen. But, I'm able to deal with them. But also, being sober, I would never be able to do these things that I've done. Today, like I said, I was on a phone call about, just before we started talking, from somebody who's looking, I would never be able to do that. And I think I'm quite good in that area, speaking to somebody and being able to discern what they're saying and kind of give them a little bit of motivation and encouragement. So, yeah, and I say to people, the guys that I try to help, just trust the process. I mean, I go to Toastmasters today, John, and for a guy like me, who was like a mute and could hardly string two sentences together, when I got sober, public speaking,
They say that's the biggest fear that human beings have is
yeah.
public speaking.
Yeah. And I can quite see because if you let the ego in, if you let the anxiety, fear in, you're on rocky ground. But it's not. I mean, that was one of my first self-help books that I read. Susan Jeffers, Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway, and that is such a great principle behind that. Because I used to think, when you see people who are great speakers, that they're feeling no anxiety, and I've heard it's not the case. They're still feeling it, but they're not letting it overwhelm them.
Right. Right. Sometimes before I do a podcast interview, I feel a bit of anxiety and nervousness, and it's kind of just energy that I work with. But like on this conversation with you, I didn't feel that. This type of interview for me is very relaxing because I'm just having coffee, talking with a friend in recovery. I'm not, I don't have to worry about, did I read your book right? Do I understand what what you're trying to communicate, and all of that. But I love talking to authors.
Did you read that chapter? Did you read that part in the
book? So there's a lot less pressure, and I just enjoy it. I enjoy it, and like I say, this is my meeting too.
Yeah. And I have questions slightly. I've only went to about 6 face-to-face meetings since lockdown. And part of me thinks, should I be going along? And if I'm being really honest, I'm totally fine with Zoom. I really am.
A lot of people are.
Yeah. And I'm fine doing things where I'm like connecting, outdoor swimming, exercising, dancing when I can.
What kind of dancing do you do, by the way?
Well, it's been Argentine tango for the last 8 years.
Cool.
Yeah. So it's been 18 years I've been dancing.
Now that's good for you too, isn't it? That's good exercise.
Totally. To a degree, the tango, but I suppose it's the combination of meeting people and the cognitive part of learning, from that as well, particularly the tango.
Well, that's cool. That's cool. See, it's fun that you can enjoy that kind of stuff sober. You could never have done that when you're drinking.
No, absolutely. And again, with that cliche or whatever statement, just trusting the process. I mean, 18 years ago, what was it like? I was 8 or 9 years sober, but I decided, what will I do here? I need to do something different, And a friend suggested, okay, let's go on to dance. But he didn't, he stopped going, and I went along, and I continued going, and it's just great.
Now, before we leave, I wanted to ask you something. You mentioned when you contacted me that you did a podcast in relation to Toastmasters. Can you talk about, what was that about? And what was your experience with that? Would you mind going into that a little bit? Because I'm just curious.
No, not at all. In Toastmasters, you go through different things called levels. And I'm on level 4, so there's only one more level 5 to fulfill the criteria of finishing off the pathway. It's called presentation mastery, but there's 12 different pathways. And out of all the electives, I decided to try and do a podcast. And my mentor, who's done them for many years, he did help me, but I did do a lot of the technical work on it, which I've never done before. There's a piece of software called Audacity. I thought you might be, yeah. And basic stuff, but I was able to merge in my voice and the music in the background. Hopefully the music I've done is copyright free, but yeah, it's one of those things you've got to be mindful of. So it's called Health and Wealth. It's on Spotify, but it's really basic. So I'm really just looking to take it forward and do really, really just similar stuff we're doing here, but talking to people in any area of life. I've got quite a few friends, on Facebook or whatever, on social media, who are in the political world, and the dancing, and just and swimming as well. So,
well, that's cool. That's fine. It's called Health and Well. What's it
Health
called?
and Wealth.
Health and Wealth. Okay.
WELTH. Yeah, but it's just one podcast. That's all I've done.
Okay. Well, I'll check it out.